I know we don't like talking about this, but it's an important conversation, my good friends, because guess what? For the past year or two, Donald Trump's name has hardly come out of my mouth. That's a fact. But, after that January 6th insurrection, the violence that was created by Donald Trump in many ways. Well, I had not talked about Donald Trump in many conversations. I just let him out of my mouth. But I got to bring him back just for a moment to essentially unpack the explosive new criminal charges against Donald Trump for his efforts to overturn the 2020 election results, marking his third indictment in 4 months as he continues to campaign for re-election to the presidency of the United States of America. The 4-count indictment unveiled on Tuesday by special counsel Jack Smith alleges that Trump conspired to defraud the United States by preventing Congress from certifying Joe Biden's victory, pushing fraud claims he knew was untrue, and pressuring state and federal officials to alter the results and inciting violence, yes, an assault on the Capitol of the United States here in Washington, D.C., my good friends. Oh, I got a lot to say about what has gone on with Donald Trump, but let's continue to unpack this issue. The most serious charges against Trump carries a maximum penalty of 20 years in prison. And he is set to appear, in federal court. He not set to appear. He actually appeared in federal court yesterday. Yesterday afternoon. It was a zoo out there. I had planned to actually go down to the federal courthouse, but I decided not to. There will be other times to see that guy in action. I hope that actually they allow the proceedings, which is critically important to the American people, to be public proceedings, because this is a public event of interest to the American people. I know for Black folks, we want to see it. Hey, they showed O.J. Simpson trial, so why not have the Donald Trump trial be live? Yeah. Some people will say that it would be a circus. I'm not sure if it will be a circus. I just think that, hey, guess what? We need to show him for who he is. And I'm sure Jack Smith, who is alleging that Donald Trump conspired to defraud the United States by preventing Congress from certifying Joe Biden victory, has a lot to say. And I want to hear it. I'm sure the American people want to hear it as well. Well, hold on and wait a minute. There's more. Fact is, Donald Trump attempted to strip away from us our democracy and our individual rights to vote, to protect himself and remain in power. Well, that's what Robert Weissman, president of Public Citizen, is saying. He also speaks with the, he's also spoken with others in this issue, and I want to cover it in many ways. The bottom line is, it's the first time in U.S. history that a former president has been criminally charged with conspiring to overturn an election. Did you hear what I just said? This is the first time in U.S. history that a former president has been criminally charged for conspiring to overturn an election. Yeah. Yesterday, Donald Trump, appeared in court because he was indicted for 4 counts. And let's walk through this one more time, because I think it's critically important for people to understand what is going on here. Conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, tampering with a witness, and conspiracy against the rights of citizens. Did you hear the complexity of what we're talking about here? The right to vote, to be counted. This, my good friends, is the 3rd time in 4 months that the former Republican, I don't even like saying the word president, but this is the 3rd time in 4 months that the former Republican president has been criminally, let me get this words right, criminally charged as a defendant. And as he attempts to regain the presidency of the United States, no other president has ever been indicted before. No other president in the history of the United States of America. Actually, some of them should have been indicted for their support of the slave trade. Oh, and other incidences. But that's just my opinion, and I could be right. Yeah, you remember that the Justice Department counsel Jack Smith actually announced the indictments and the charges just this week, Tuesday, and they brought him in to Washington, D.C. I'm talking about Donald Trump. Came into Washington, D.C. and had the audacity, after the indictment, after his appearance in court, running under, he looked like in many ways O.J. Simpson trial. They actually had a white van following them. It looked like an O.J. Simpson situation in many ways. And then Donald Trump had the audacity to attack the District of Columbia, talking about how dirty the District of Columbia was and how graffiti was all over the place while he was driving through. This guy is an habitual liar. When he went from the courthouse to Ronald Reagan, airport, or national airport, as Black folks like to call it, because we're not into calling it the Ronald Reagan Airport. We still call it the National Airport, or DCA, Ronald Reagan Airport. Well, when he went to that airport in DC, he alleged that he saw all sorts of graffiti and the District of Columbia is so dirty. What kind of knucklehead, foolish garbage was that to say? Yeah, he had to throw some dirt at the mayor of the city of Washington, D.C. in so many ways. But I hope that people ignored him. Here's the fact. The fact of the matter is the attack on our nation's capital on January 6, 2021, which will live in infamy, by the way, was essentially an unprecedented attack on the seat of American democracy. The fact of the matter is as the indictment described, it was fueled by lies. Like Donald Trump lied yesterday talking about the District of Columbia being so filthy and dirty. I'm concerned about his mental health. Fact of the matter is that he has lied throughout his presidency and before his presidency. You remember when he talked about Barack Obama being not a citizen of the United States, fueling all that madness. He's unfortunately, a bad liar, an awful liar. He is a liar, my good friends, because he essentially was indicted for fueling the lies, obstructing the bedrock of the function of the United States government, the nation's processing and collecting and counting and certifying the results of the presidential election. I'm going to say it again, my good friends. This guy obstructed the bedrock of the United States government. And that's what the indictment is all about. The men and women of law enforcement who defended the United States Capitol on January 6th are heroes, my good friends. They are patriots. The fact is that they are the very best of us. As Jack Smith indicated, they put their lives on the line to defend who we are as a country and as a people. They defended the very institutions, the principles that define the United States. Well, that's what Jack Smith is saying. And by the way, Jack Smith is a respected lawyer and a respected prosecutor. And he's coming full metal jacket. Full metal jacket against Donald Trump. Fact of the matter is, since the attack on our Capitol here in Washington, D.C., the Department of Justice has remained committed to ensuring accountability for those criminally responsible for what happened that day. Well, that's what Jack Smith is saying. But I'll tell you, the judges, the federal judges, many of them appointed by Donald Trump, have gone soft on those that have actually been convicted, giving them 2, 3, 4, 5 year sentences instead of throwing the book at him. I wish Donald Trump would get the book thrown at him. This is my opinion, my good friends. Fact of the matter is that most of the serious charges against Donald Trump carries a maximum of 20 years in prison. The case now has been assigned to District Judge Tanya Chutkan, who was appointed by President Obama. And she has handed down sentences in the January 6th insurrection cases that were harsher than prosecutors recommended. And I salute her. Go ahead, Tanya Chutkan. Fact of the matter is, the 45-page indictment against the 45th president of the United States also references 6 unnamed conspirators. Oh, they conspired with Donald Trump. They are likely to include 4 of Trump's lawyers. Rudy, in your face, Giuliani. When I say in your face, you remember when his, I'm guilty. Yeah, I'm making fun of Rudy. You remember Rudy when he had his hair dyed black and he was in the rain or whatever, or he was sweating and it started rolling down his face, the Grecian formula or whatever. Rudy Grecian formula Giuliani, probably a non-indicted co-conspirator at this point. Joe Eastman, Sidney Powell, as well as Jeffrey Clark, a former Justice Department official, all those folks are, a part of the challenge. And this indictment comes as Trump pleaded not guilty in June after he was charged with unlawful retention of classified government documents after leaving office, and obstruction of justice in another Jack Smith case. Last week, prosecutors in that case added 3 more criminal counts to accuse Donald Trump of ordering employees to delete security video while he was under investigation. Oh, there's more, my good friends. This goes on forever. In March, a grand jury convened by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office indicted Trump for falsifying business records in hide hush money payments to a porn star, Stormy Daniels, before the 2016 election. This is insanity, my good friends. Meanwhile, Trump faces a 4th criminal investigation, yes, in the state of Georgia, over accusations he sought to undo his 2020 election loss in that state as well. And that sister in Georgia is no joke. It's getting bad, my good friends. It's not getting any better for Donald Trump. And by the way, it didn't get any better for the American people when he allowed millions of people to die of COVID. We have not forgotten you, Donald Trump. We have not forgotten what you did to the American people. Well, that's enough of Donald Trump. We'll see how that plays out. We will see how that plays out. Boston. Let's go back to Boston for a moment. Let's come back to Boston. Boston is amazing. It has its challenges, but it is an amazing city. And I have to tell you, I'm totally impressed. I am totally impressed. I should have been at that event. The NAACP National Convention that was held in Boston at the Boston Convention and Exhibition Center, where national delegates and leaders saw a gathering of Black folks and others, Black folks and other people of color, and actually non-people of color, push back against white supremacy and conservative policies that have essentially poised to threaten Black communities across the United States. I have to tell you, I salute the NAACP and the work that it did. I tend not to have been wait a minute. Let me go backwards. I'm a supporter of the NAACP. But from time to time, I've been critical of the NAACP for its lack of engagement in community issues. But I'll tell you, this NAACP convention, from the outside looking in, was phenomenal. Well done, my good friends at the NAACP. Well done. And I'm so glad that the Congressional Black Caucus and its members have warned of the return of Jim Crow. You know what Jim Crow was? Well, I'm not sure if it's the return of Jim Crow. Jim Crow never stopped. U.S. Representative Jim Clyburn, a senior member of the Congressional Black Caucus, by virtue of his age, he is 83 years old, and has served 30 years in office, says he is worried, very worried. Actually, Jim Clyburn. Jim Clyburn, if I'm not mistaken, he's from South Carolina. He's the one that essentially boosted the situation for the current president of the United States to actually be president. The fact of the matter is that Jim Clyburn is indicating that he has deep concern, even fear, that conservative supermajority of Supreme Court justices that has eliminated the systemic consideration of race as a college admissions and prospect of a Republican presidential nomination possibly going to the former President Donald Trump and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, both being, yes, racially backwards in terms of their sentiment and policies, is a challenge for America and the African American community. Here's what Jim Clyburn has to say. He says that ever since the 1954 Supreme Court decision, Brown versus Board of Education, forces in our country went to work to get a new Supreme Court. That decision, as you know, was a 9-0 decision, the South Carolina Democrats said. So essentially, this Congressman, Jim Clyburn, is essentially saying that since Brown versus Board of Education, in which the Supreme Court in a 9-0 decision actually said that, well, Black folks in education in particular should have equal educational opportunity. That's what Brown versus Board of Education was all about. And the Supreme Court at the time, 9-0, decided that Black folks should have educational equity, educational equality. And they began the process from there. And when I say they began the process from there, it is actually Black folks under assault by folks that did not appreciate the 9-0 decision of the United States Supreme Court at the time. Yeah, Clyburn says, so we have now gone from a 9-0 decision in favor of democracy to a 6-3 decision against democracy. Clyburn said, referring to the majority of recent college affirmative action cases, and they do plan not to stop there. Jim Clyburn at the event at the NAACP also talked about the fact that, and I'm going to quote him, my grandparents sacrificed a whole lot for me to get where I am today. I'm afraid that my children and grandchildren are going to be living the experiences that my parents and grandparents had, and we have not been very careful. The fact is, and he quoted, again, invoking the Jim Crow segregation, and I say this, the next 18 months will determine whether or not we relive these experiences. We have to be vigilant. Those are some powerful words from Jim Clyburn in Boston, talking about the fact that the United States may be going backwards. Well, it's not a maybe for me, is going backwards, and will try to introduce in many ways Jim Crow legislation. I don't think so, my good friends. That ain't gonna work. Well, I understand that my good brother is up there in age, 83, and maybe thinking that Jim Crow is going to come back. I'm going to tell you, it ain't coming back anytime soon, my good friends. Oh, those folks in Florida are talking about what Black history means. It's not necessarily Jim Crow, but it's coming close. And Black folks, I'm sure, in Florida and every other city in the United States and state in the US are not going to accept Jim Crow coming back. Now, Clyburn's comments about looking ahead to next year's presidential election was met with applause during the NAACP event over at Roxbury Community College. Yay, yay. Representative Ayanna Presley hosted the training session for organizers and a town hall meeting afterwards that the 5 Black caucus members attended. Again, I said, I got to salute the NAACP. I was critical. I'll tell you, I was wondering if the NAACP was going to lift up the African-American community of Boston and actually be engaged in many ways in the Black community. And it appears as though that was a success, my good friends. The caucus, has the largest ever Black members, 58 members, and they have been taking on a national tour, with Boston's being the 10th of a dozen town hall meetings scheduled to hear people outside of Washington, D.C. here in the Beltway to talk about the recent Supreme Court decisions and the issues impacted by the Supreme Court decisions, and essentially to motivate Black voters to turn out and to essentially re-elect President Joe Biden and Vice President, slip of the tongue, Kamala Harris. Did I say her name right? Who made up, she actually, Vice President I butcher up her name. Kamala Harris, who made an unannounced appearance at Roxbury Community College. I'll tell you, that was impressive. And by the way, Roxbury should be celebrating what happened and actually celebrating the NAACP for their full throttle engagement in the African-American community of Boston. Leaders and the Black caucus and the NAACP are actually confronting this threat. And I'm so glad, the threat of the Supreme Court. And I'm so glad that they are. I celebrate them. Actually, I'm a new NAACP fan. And that's unusual for me to say, but I'm saying it. I am a new NAACP fan. Well, I was an NAACP fan back in the 1970s, actually, when I was youth affairs advisor to Tom Atkins at the NAACP when he was president. So I was full throttle in support of the NAACP Boston branch then. Well, things change, life changes, NAACP changed, and I actually was critical of the NAACP for many years. But it seems as though the NAACP is getting its act together. Here's the facts, my good friends. After Ronald Reagan was elected president in 1980, the NAACP was led by Benjamin Hooks. You remember him? a Baptist minister, and he actually ran the NAACP. At that time, I respected the NAACP. Actually, I respected Benjamin Hooks. He was an amazing guy. But from then on, it was like, hey, guess what? During the 1990s, I questioned the NAACP. I wondered if they actually were doing the right thing in the African American community. I remember when Representative Kwasi Nfume of Maryland, who chaired the Congressional Black Caucus back in, I guess, the 80s and 90s, before resigning to lead the NAACP, was one of the most challenged individuals of the NAACP at the time. Lots of stuff went on with the NAACP. I'm just so glad that they have come back into the fold and actually doing some good work in the African American community. I salute the NAACP and the Boston branch for doing a phenomenal job at the convention, or for the convention in Boston, with the African American community. I wish they spent a little bit more money on Black media. Not too sure if they did contracts with Black media. And by the way, Black media in Boston is limited. Boston Black News, Boston Praise Radio and TV, and the Bay State Banner. That's it. I'm going to say it again. Boston Black News, Boston Praise Radio, and the Bay State Banner. Essentially, that's it for Black news outlets in Boston. And from now on, when Black organizations or national organizations come into Boston, maybe, just maybe, just maybe, Black institutions need to make sure that Black media outlets get exposure, my good friends. Black media outlets need to get exposure and dollars and cents into their coffers moving forward. Hopefully the NAACP will do that in the future. The Urban League and other organizations, National Association of Black Journalists, National Association of Minority Contractors, the list goes on. Historically Black colleges and universities, when they have conventions, conferences, anyone coming to Boston, there should be access to the dollars and cents for media, Black media. That's my position, and I know I am, in this situation, right. So again, I salute Black media. Actually, here's the why am I focusing on Black media? Because I just read an article in the Bay State Banner talking about the importance of Black media. Yeah, the article in the Bay State Banner, actually it was an editorial in which the banner indicates that with the pomp and circumstance of legislative bill signing, President Biden last week declared 3 sites in Mississippi and Illinois national landmarks and remembrance of Emmett Till. The first two signs placed along the Tallahatchie River, marking the place Till's mutilated body was recovered, had been repeatedly shot full of holes. The brand new historic marker there is steel, 3 inches thick, bulletproof, and cannot be removed. And the National Monument is also provided with police protection. Yeah. During the ceremony, Biden gave credit to the Black press for telling the story of Till's lynching and the horror of white supremacy and racism. At the request of his mother, Mamie Till Mobley, Jet magazine put on the cover of the photo a disfigured body lying in a funeral casket because she wanted the world to see what they did to my baby. Salute her. This appalling image was reprinted in newspapers across the country, triggering civil rights movements. According to historians, photographer Moneta Sleet became the first Black journalist to win a Pulitzer Prize. This is one of the most powerful examples of how Black press brought change to this country and the attention to the horrific Southern racist terrorism going on at a time that for too many Black Americans had to endure, by clearly representing and presenting an unvarnished truth that Black press shined a bright light into darkness. Oh man, I'll tell you, when I read this, and by the way, you got to read this this editorial. It goes on. It wanted to highlight the challenges that we went through and how the Black press is so important to what happens in America. The Black press is so important. And I'm trying to connect what I was talking about earlier about the NAACP and the successes, and making sure that the Black press gets some of those dollars and cents that come into a city to educate the public about what is going on with the city and with the NAACP and with the events and the whole 9 yards. Black press is critically important. Fact is, there are about 300 Black-owned newspapers in the country. Some are, and more are than some are more than a century old. For example, Philadelphia Tribune, 1884, Baltimore Afro-American, 1892, New Journal and Guide, and that's out of Norfolk, Virginia, 1900, Chicago Defender, 1905. We can keep on going on. Pittsburgh Courier, 1907, New Amsterdam News, 1909. There are so many Black newspaper outlets that exist in America that are historic. But let's not talk just about Black newspapers. Let's talk about Black media for a minute, and let's talk about the importance of Black media, such as Boston Black News and Boston Praise Radio and TV. Yeah, that medium, that internet connected FM and FM, as well as social media platform across the US and around the world, is important. We have to keep vigilant, my good friends. We have to, in Boston's Black community, support Boston Black news. We have to support Boston Praise Radio and TV. We have to support this platform. If we don't support this platform, it goes out of existence. And we have seen that over and over and over again in the African American community. Great ideas, great opportunities, and we lose those opportunities for the lack of support. We have to support our institutions and help them grow, my good friends, and help our institutions grow. This is All Things Black Politics. I'm your host, Leon Rock, and I got a lot to say, as you can tell. I'm so excited about the fact that we have essentially become a successful city of Boston, Massachusetts, with regards to the NAACP convention, a successful city in pulling off an NAACP convention that all people that have been involved in the NAACP convention say it was phenomenal. So happy for that, my good friends. We're going to have, I'm going to invite the NAACP president and former president of the NAACP Boston branch on the program, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, to kind of dissect what occurred at the convention. We should have had them on prior to the event, but they were doing a lot of organizing, a whole bunch of organizing. Hopefully in the near future, we'll have them on this broadcast on All Things Black Politics, because we want to talk about the politics of putting on a convention of this type, how they pulled this all off, how they were able to build this success, and just talk as well about best practices, how people can learn about what happened at the NAACP Boston branch, how it supported the national convention, and how other cities, how other towns, how other communities can do the same thing and pull off a convention of this type. And then remember to stay out of Florida, my good friend. Stay out of Florida. Anyone that is planning a convention in Florida, don't do it. Don't go to Florida for a convention. I'm not saying don't go to Florida, period. Don't be foolish. You can go to Florida. Please, go to Florida. Enjoy. But don't hold a convention to give money to a state that doesn't care about Black folks and Black folks' history. That's my opinion. I could be wrong. We got about 4 or 5 minutes left in this broadcast. On All Things Black Politics, I'm your host, Leon Rock. I've covered kind of sort of everything today, from the situation with Donald Trump. Donald Trump, as we talked about earlier, has been indicted, and we talked about that indictment at length this earlier during the broadcast. And I'm so happy. Actually, I should be ashamed of myself, or should I? Should I be ashamed of myself or not for saying this? Donald Trump has been indicted for pushing fraud claims he knew was untrue. He pressured state, federal officials to alter the results and inciting a violent assault on the United States Capitol. Should I be saying that I'm elated that he was charged? Let me say it. I'm elated that he was charged. We've covered that today. We've talked about the fact that these are serious charges against Donald Trump, and it carries a maximum penalty of 20 years in prison. And he just appeared in court yesterday. We talked about that at length. We also talked about the fact that, well, the NAACP had an amazing convention, a thought-provoking convention, a phenomenal convention. But we also talked about the fact that one of the senior members of the Congressional Black Caucus, 83-year-old Jim, Clyburn, a senior member of the Congressional Black Caucus, by virtue of his age and 30 years in office, is worried that Jim Crow is coming back. I say, no, don't worry, my good friend. Don't worry, because Jim Crow is never coming back on this United States of America. We're not going to stand for a Jim Crow. We're not going to stand for a Jim Clyburn. We're with you. We appreciate you sounding the alarm. And alarms need to be sounded. Yet, my good friend, Jim Clyburn, who, by the way, I've had the opportunity to interview. I should share that interview. It was over at the Barack Obama convention back in, I forget, it was a while back when Barack Obama was elected president of the United States. I got the opportunity to interview Jim Clyburn. I should share that old tape because it looks old too, of Jim Clyburn and me. Actually, during the interview, I think I had actually gray hair. I actually had hair on my head. Anyway, I digress. Jim Clyburn is suggesting in many ways that we should be vigilant with the issue of the United States Supreme Court and be vigilant with the issue of Jim Crow coming back to the United States. I am not at all concerned about Jim Crow, my good friends. It ain't coming anytime soon. This is Leon Rock, and this is All Things Black Politics. We have talked about, well, who have we talked about? The former president of the United States getting indicted. We've talked about the NAACP convention. We've talked about the importance of Black media, Black press moving forward as we have conventions in Boston, Massachusetts, and making sure that Black folks support Black media